Good morning. Hi, this is Joe DeMare. I am your host for the next hour on For a Green Future. And Marvin there is talking about how things used to be. Well, with For a Green Future, we're talking about how things are going to be and how we want them to be. Specifically in terms of the environment and the ecology, because that underlies everything that we do. And so if we want a good future, if we want a livable future, we need to have a green future. And that's why we're here at today's show, For a Green Future. And it's a great show. We're going to be opening it up to the lines. You're going to be able to call in and ask any sort of questions that you want. And this is the very first episode of For a Green Future. And so the title of this episode is Getting to Know You. And so I'd like you to call in, and when you call in, ask for the what you want to know about ecology and what ideas you have for this show, what things you'd like to hear about, and what things you'd like to have us talk about in the future. And we're going to be talking with a lot of people. We've got some people calling in today, some very interesting and informative people. One person people here in the Toledo area probably knows is a woman called named Marky Miller. She's expected to call in a bit and talk to us a little bit about this Lake Erie Bill of Rights that was going to be on the ballot in February. She's part of a group that helped put this on the ballot. We're also going to get a call from Diane DeRigo. She's in an organization called the Nuclear Information Resource Service, and she's going to talk to us about a plan that's in the works to another evil plan to redefine the term high-level radioactive waste to exclude high-level radioactive waste. So, and then we have a few other people that might call in here, and hopefully you'll call in, because already this is the best talk show in the Toledo area, but it will get better if you call in. So before we get to the phones, though, I would like to tell you a little bit about myself. My name's Joe DeMare, D-E-M-A-R-E, and I have been an environmentalist my entire life. Literally since the time I was in high school, people would go down and they'd be hanging out at the free period at their lunch hour. I'd be up in the library reading ecological textbooks because, to me, ecology is just a fascinating subject. To me, it's the queen of all the sciences because it ties together all the other sciences. It ties together chemistry, geology, biology, everything that we know scientifically all comes together to create the ecology that we live in that supports us. And all those other sciences, all the separate disciplines of science are sort of taking the world apart, taking the universe apart and saying, oh, look at this part, look at how this part works, and look at that part. Oh, isn't that cool how physics does this and that? But then ecology puts it all back together again, and ecology is like the overview that says all these things all operating at once, interconnected with each other and interchanging with each other. That all together creates the wonderful universe that we get to look at. And as I was getting ready for the program this morning, I was up around 5 o'clock, looked out the window, and there I could see, in the pre-dawn light, I could see the planet Venus, which is incredibly beautiful here from Earth. It's just super bright and just hanging there in the sky. But to me, seeing that planet is a reminder. One of the things we've learned studying ecology is just how delicate this balance is, that if one or two things go awry, literally all life on Earth could stop. And, of course, one of those things is global warming. And Venus is the end result of global warming. Put too much carbon dioxide in the air, and you get the planet Venus, which is, a planet where there's sulfuric acid clouds. It literally rains sulfuric acid but it's so hot, it's over 400 degrees, that rain actually never reaches the ground at Venus. It just evaporates back up into the clouds. That's the extreme end of global warming, and we don't have to get the planet Earth all the way there to wipe ourselves out. All we have to do is get it up, 120, 130. That's hot enough. We would not be able to survive. And one of the things I've known or realized since I was a youth, I've understood this one scientific concept called positive feedback loop. And positive feedback loops, they sound wonderful, but what it is when you have energy or when you have an input going into a system, if you tie that input, if you tie the output from that system back into the input, you get feedback. And as we know in the radio business, if you bring your microphone on your phone too close to the microphone on the radio, you get that horrible screeching noise. That's because all that energy that's coming out of the radio is being fed back into the radio, and so the amount of energy in the system accelerates incredibly fast. It's almost a straight line up, and very quickly you're blasting away at the full capacity of all the speakers and all the microphones involved. That's a positive feedback loop. Well, I've known for a long time, probably 30, 40 years, that with global warming, we are actually caught in a positive feedback loop. That is, everything that we're doing, such as melting the ice caps, all these effects of global warming feed back into the whole system and cause more global warming. So you melt the ice caps, and then the solar radiation coming in no longer gets reflected back out into space by the white ice caps. It gets absorbed by the oceans, and that warms the ocean more. You warm the ocean more, and then that in turn warms the atmosphere more, and once the atmosphere is warmed up more, then more heat gets trapped, because warming the whole planet, when you warm a system, a biological system, then it releases other gases, like the permafrost will melt and release methane. Methane is also a greenhouse gas, and so that increases global warming. And so this is a scientific principle, and most scientists don't get to say publicly we're caught in a positive feedback loop, because they're very cautious. They have to protect their jobs. They can't be ridiculed. Luckily, I'm not employed by any research institute. I can actually say what I think and say what I see is happening. And what I see happening is a positive feedback loop. It's getting warmer and warmer, faster and faster, and the effects of that warming is more warming. And so that knowledge like that, things that I've learned studying ecology and science and the environment, is what has made me an environmentalist. And having this knowledge, telling my wife and my son, or my immediate family and friends, that's not enough. We all need to learn these lessons so we can all change our behaviors. We can break this positive feedback loop. We can create the green future. And in fact, later on in the show, we are going to have a letter from the green future, because oddly enough, as I was getting ready to do the show this morning, there was this flash of light on my bedstand, and I looked over, and lo and behold, there's this envelope, and it turned out to be a letter from my great-great-granddaughter. She managed to send a letter back in time from the green future, and so that's going to be read later on in the show. As I said, we're going to be taking calls starting around 8:15. That's about 5 minutes. The number to call will be 866-240-1065. That's the call-in number, 866-240-1065. Write it down and write your question down next to it, because if you have it written down, it'll be a little easier to ask it. It'll go quicker when you call in. So when you call in, I really want calls from the general audience. And I know that some of you, this is ESPN radio most of the time, and some of you tuned in here at this hour expecting to hear people talking about football and and golf and baseball and all those other sports. And you have my sympathy, but remember, sports takes up a huge amount of our media time. There's all kinds of programs and stations and people constantly talking about sports. And so what we're doing is we're just taking back just a little bit of that time. We're taking back like an hour to talk to people about something else, because the environment does affect sports. I mean, you got to admit, recently there have been golf tournaments that were canceled because of hurricanes. That had to bum you out. And I promise I'm going to make this transition easy for you sports fans that are continuing to listen. And you've only got to listen, just for this 1 hour. I promise to use lots of sports analogies, so to make it a little easier for you to get through this hour. And it's going to be fun, the same way sports is fun. I mean, one thing I've always admired about people who are into sports is just the vast amount of data that you guys process. I mean, that you memorize people's records, you memorize the records of sports teams, and we have these tremendous brains, and I always see that demonstrated by sports fans, because you guys know every little detail about every athlete and like where they grew up and what their RBI was, and then that one summer where they had the really bad season, and you know all these things. You've got all this information in your head. I'd like to share just a little bit of that headspace with you, with things on the environment, with things that actually are affecting you and your friends and your family every day. And if you're an environmentalist, then one of the things that you oppose is nuclear power. And one of the reasons for this is the understanding of what really is this circle of life that supports all of us. No, it's not what Disney says. It's not some monkey holding up a lion cub. Nope, I'm sorry, that's not actually the circle of life. The circle of life is the sharing of all the resources in the environment between all the living things. And, you might look over at a stand of woods or a field or something as you're driving by and not really think that you are connected to that field. But every time you breathe in and out, you put something like 7 or 1.7 septillion carbon atoms into the air every time you breathe out. And that air that you've just breathed out gets mixed in the entire atmosphere. So a molecule that you breathed just a week ago could right now be over South America or in Africa's atmosphere. And it's getting absorbed by the plants in that area, by the algae in the ocean. So part of what you are breathing right now is going out into the entire globe, and you're sharing those atoms with the other living things on the planet. And that is the true circle of life, because all these atoms are getting mixed around and shared, and they get, put into this organism, then that organism. And so these atoms are constantly cycling, and that is the true circle of life. And so coming back to nuclear power, the reason nuclear power is so terrible is not just the threat of a meltdown. I mean, everybody focuses on meltdowns, and we can all remember the image of that huge mushroom cloud over the Fukushima nuclear power plant when it finally did melt down. Even after they had told us for decades that, nuclear plants can't possibly melt down. There's so many redundant systems. There's no way we can have this disaster happen. And then we all saw the disaster happen, because we ecologists, those of us who knew the science of what was going on, we understood that meltdowns were inevitable, that these are just such complex machines, so many things could go wrong. It was going to happen. So now it finally did happen. And so meltdowns, though, are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what's wrong with nuclear power. So remember how I said that all these atoms that we're producing all the time, are getting constantly mixed in the atmosphere and in the ground, and they're getting put into other organisms. Well, nuclear power creates radioactive atoms, and those atoms act, once they get absorbed, once they get put into a living thing, they act exactly like suicide bombers, because they're indistinguishable chemically from regular atoms. But at some point, at some unpredictable point, a radioactive atom will explode, literally explode, just blow itself to pieces. And when it does that, it shoots off radioactive particles that go and destroy cells, and they can damage cells, and that's how they cause cancers and leukemias and a whole host of other problems. So I just wanted to go through really quick. A nice friend of mine on Facebook gave me this list just to give you a quick idea of all the radioactive atoms that are created every day in nuclear power plants. We got yttrium, krypton, rubidium, strontium, zirconium, niobium, molybdenum, technetium, ruthenium, rhodium, palladium, tellurium, antimony, iodine, xenon, cesium, barium, parasodicium, neodymium, samarium, europium, peractinium, of course the uraniums and the neptuniums, and the worst of them all, plutonium. And what happens is that circle of life gets broken by radioactive elements. They get put out into the atmosphere, they get absorbed by living things, they explode inside those living things, and they damage them and kill them. And so if you understand the circle of life, then you understand that nuclear power is inherently evil. Whether or not another nuclear plant melts down, all of them every day are producing tons of these radioactive atoms that at some point in the future will kill and damage living things. And so that's just one thing. We've got global warming, we've got nuclear power. There's 1,000 other issues at environmentalism, and really 1 hour a week is not enough to cover these things. But I promised I would open up the phone lines at 8:15. I'm a little bit over that already, but we've already got a couple callers on the line, and we will take them in just a moment. I just want to reiterate what we got coming up right after these calls. I expect them to be great calls, because I expect you guys to ask great questions. We've got our letter from the future coming up, and speaking of meltdowns, we have a part of the show I call the race to a meltdown, because all of us who oppose the nuclear power industry know that another meltdown like Fukushima is inevitable. And as long as nuclear power plants keep running, at some point, some of them are going to melt down, or there's going to be another meltdown, and probably it's going to happen in the U.S. And we have, so every week I'll talk about the race to melt down the next plant that just came a little bit closer ahead in that race to the next meltdown. But that's later on in the show. All right. So enough about me. Although if you have any questions about me, one more thing I wanted to mention about myself. I am the political director of the Ohio Green Party, but I am not speaking for the Green Party in this show. I'm speaking strictly for myself as a member. But I am a member of a party which has now been banned by the state of Ohio because we didn't get our 3% in the gubernatorial election. The Republican-controlled legislature passed a law that said if we don't get 3%, we lose our party status. So I am the political director of a banned banned political party in the United States of America. It's really kind of an interesting thing. I have a lot of other environmental history I could share with you, but I did run for U.S. Senate in 2016, got about 90,000 votes, 1.7%, spending a few pennies per vote compared to the many dollars that my Republican and Democrat opponents spent. So this is not, though, a show about the Green Party. This is a show about environmental issues. I'm just telling you this as part of my history. Okay, so now we have a caller on the line already, so let's go to the phones. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, hi. This is Joe DeMare, and you're on For a Green Future. You have a question?
Awesome. Yes, I do. Joe, I was wondering if you could provide a little, excuse me, a little clarification on solar and the solar industry, the wind industry. Honestly, I've heard a lot of conflicting things about those industries. On the one hand, I've heard, oh yeah, the solar industry, it's great, but we still have to subsidize it. It's not economically viable yet. We still have to prop it up, so it's really not a viable energy source. But then on the other hand, I've heard, that it is fully profitable, standing on its own 2 feet. And I've kind of heard the same thing about, wind. So it's like I hear two completely different things. On the one hand, I hear, the solar industry, it has to be subsidized in Europe and, possibly even here in the U.S. What's the real deal? Are these technologies fully profitable on their own, or are we still subsidizing them to keep them afloat?
Well, the short answer is that wind and solar are much cheaper and more economically viable than coal, than gas, than nuclear power. That's the short answer. The long answer is that, yes, we are giving subsidies to wind and solar right now, but those subsidies are literally a fraction of the subsidies that are being given to the oil and the gas industries. If you removed all subsidies tomorrow, all oil wells would shut down, all nuclear power plants would shut down, and we would be switching incredibly quickly over to just wind and solar and hydropower. So that's a point that the people who are trying to block wind and solar never make. They never mention the subsidies that they get. And as I said, they're many times, something on the order of 10 times what wind and solar get. So, so that's the short answer, or that's the longer answer. And for demonstrations of this, all you have to do is look a little bit south to the city of Bowling Green. Bowling Green has 4 utility-scale wind turbines. Oh, and by the way, when we talk about wind, we have to talk about utility scale. When you talk about the little tiny wind turbines, 1 or 2 or 3 kilowatts that are on, you might see them on houses or farmhouses, those aren't economical. But when you get big, when you get up to the 660 kilowatt, 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt, those are economically viable. And so just look south to Bowling Green, and what you see there, they have 4 utility scale turbines, and they turned out to have much better wind than they thought from the initial wind study. So they've generated much more power than was expected. They were able to pay off the loans early. They had 10-year loans on them. They're all paid off now. And those wind turbines are generating electricity at half the market rate. So cheaper than coal, cheaper than fracked gas.
Really?
Yes, really. And in fact, the cheap power from the wind turbines at Bowling Green are actually subsidizing the more expensive power they have to buy from coal plants in order to meet their total needs, because they haven't built enough windmills. That's the only problem. Now, another thing we have in Bowling Green is the largest solar field in the state of Ohio. A lot of people don't know this, but no,
I didn't know it.
Yeah, that solar field, it's located outside of town on some land that had been, it was farmland, and now it's covered in solar panels, and they're actually doing like meadow type wilderness things under the solar panels, so bringing in bees and birds and so forth. So that solar plant, that was done completely on an economical basis. They calculated how much it would cost to install, how much they would get out of it, and it turned out to be just on its own a profitable enterprise for the city of Bowling Green, which has a municipal utility. So yes, the short answer and the long answer are that wind and solar are more economically feasible than gas and nuclear and oil. And the obvious reason is you don't have to continuously pay fuel costs. The fuel is free and it comes to you. You don't have to build an infrastructure to get the wind to the wind turbines. And so,
Right.
Yep, so there's the answer to your question.
Okay. All right. That's good. Very informative. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for the call. All right, I believe we have another caller on the line, and it is Marky Miller. Hello, Ms. Miller.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, and thanks so much for calling in.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for inviting me on.
Well, I think that people in the area, in the Toledo area, want to know about this Lake Erie Bill of Rights that is going to be on the ballot in February. And, I understand that you're one of the people that helped put this thing together, and so I was wondering if you could just give us a quick rundown on it.
Sure. So I'm an organizer with a group called Toledoans for Safe Water. We were born out of the Toledo water crisis in 2014, and we were just a group of citizens who were a little frustrated with the inaction we were seeing around what happened. We lost our water for 3 days. We felt very vulnerable as a community, and we wanted to get involved.
Right, and just a quick recap, we lost that water. The city of Toledo was unable to use its water system because of an algae bloom in Lake Erie, and that algae bloom was caused by pollution getting into the lake and then giving the algae in there more nutrients than they should have had, and that caused a huge explosion in the algae, and some of that algae produced, or I shouldn't say algae, it's a bacteria, cyanobacteria, blue-green. It does do photosynthesis, but it's not an algae. But that bacteria creates poison, literal poison that can kill you, and that's what was getting into the water system, and that's why we lost our water. So you guys came together because of that crisis. That's wonderful. And so,
right.
So take it from there.
Right. So we put together a charter amendment for the city of Toledo called the Lake Erie Bill of Rights that would recognize the rights of Lake Erie. And, I know it sounds a little vague. When I say recognize, it's more than we're not giving Lake Erie rights. We're saying, for too long we've been violating this water source, we've been ignoring it, we've been abusing it. So we need to go back and say, wait a minute, there's this body of water, this ecosystem has the right to exist, the right to flourish. And are we being good stewards here? Are we really protecting it? The more we look into it, we see a lot of legalized pollution and feel that we're not really doing our job in doing everything that we can. I can say, and I'm not sure if people in Bowling Green have this experience, but for summers after that time, it's always watching the water, we're going to warn you if it looks like maybe you shouldn't drink it, or if you're elderly, if you're a young child, if your immune system is compromised in any way. And that's not how we want to live. That's not how we want our community to have to live, to go out and stock up on bottled water because we're afraid that it might happen again. We want it to be a little more proactive. So we've been working to put this charter amendment on the ballot to let our community vote on it. We've had some trouble getting to that point. We've been blocked several times. We've been challenged in the Ohio Supreme Court. We've been challenged by our local boards of elections, and we were persistent. And after a complicated timeline, we are finally on the February election for a special election to let the people vote.
Well, congratulations on that. And
thank you.
As a Green, I see the connection between democracy and ecology. I mean, the vast majority of people don't want to turn Lake Erie into a sewer again. The vast majority of people want us to have strong environmental protections. And so, if the will of the people gets put into law, then we'll have a clean environment and a green future. Now, this is a pretty radical idea, though, giving legal rights to what legally is right now considered an inanimate object, the Lake Erie, and the ecosystems that are in it. Some people have problems with that kind of radical thinking. What could you say to reassure those people about, because I'm sure there's going to be horror stories like you won't be allowed to brush your teeth because that'll put too much fluoride in the sewage treatment systems, or what can you say to counter the fears, because it's fears are being stoked on issues like this.
Sure. Well, what we're doing is it's all about building a movement, right? It's about community rights and self-governance and rights of nature. And I think anytime you introduce an idea of advancing rights, saying, hey, wait, we need to shift this forward, we need to give rights to, X, Y, and Z, that's going to be met with a lot of fear, a lot of skepticism. We always like to look back and tell people, when the first abolitionist or the suffragist said, hey, we have an idea, we want to change something, that was met with a lot of fear, that was met with a lot of opposition. Today we look at those things and go, oh my gosh, of course, all people should have rights. Of course, women should have rights. We look back on that now, and how could we ever oppose those things? So I'm hoping that in the future we'll look back on this and go, of course, ecosystems, the infrastructure that sustains all life, of course, that should have the ultimate right to be protected. But, I know that's going to take a while. That's going to take some time. But what we're really doing is not saying that the ecosystem or, the lake has every right that a person has. It's about creating legal standing. So it's more of changing the argument than changing the law, right? So, yeah, we're putting rights of nature as this legal framework. And, if I see something going on and I witness some pollution or some harm, I can go now and report that and try to, use the full extent of the law to pursue some kind of action. But right now, I'm really limited. I have to go through the regulatory system, or I have to be able to prove that there was personal harm to me or harm to my property, or, I don't have the standing to go and say, wait, what you're doing, you're harming this, you're hurting this community, you're hurting this body of water. So we're trying to allow our community to really be stewards of that and say, hey, wait, this is not Marky Miller versus some big, harm. This is Lake Erie versus, some big harm. But I, as a Toledoan, I get to bring that case forward. I get to present that evidence.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Marky. And I think we're going to try to focus on almost the whole show on this in a future broadcast, looking at in February, early February. And I hope you can come on and actually be a guest with us here in the studio, and because
absolutely, yeah.
And now this measure is just in the city of Toledo, right? This is just a citywide
Correct.
Ballot. Okay, all right. Well,
yeah, because it's a charter amendment, we had to. It's just Toledo voters.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Marky, and looking forward to talking with you more in the future. And
thank you so much.
Thanks for helping make a green future possible. So
no problem. Thank you.
All right. So all right. Well, actually, we have someone else. We have another caller. Diane, are you on the line?
I am. Can you hear okay, Joe?
Yes, we can hear you. All right. Well, thanks so much for calling in. Diane is a member of an organization called the Nuclear Information Resource Service. And a lot of people aren't aware, and I hope I don't embarrass you too much here, Diane, but they're based out of Washington, D.C., and they're one of the many environmental groups that, with a tiny fraction of the resources, are our defense against industries that would run wild, industries that would change laws in ways that would hurt our health and hurt the environment and block and prevent a green future from happening. And NEARS does this on the nuclear issue, and I actually, it's one of the best organizations that I know of in terms of getting the truth about nuclear issues out to the public. And I got a very alarming email from NEARS this past week about a plan an evil plan, as I like to call it, by the current administration, who shall not be named, listed as the Trump administration. They're trying to redefine the term high-level nuclear waste. And Diane, maybe you could tell us and tell our listeners what that would do to them. What does this mean for us?
Okay, yeah. The federal law right now and all the regulations have definitions for high-level radioactive waste and then for radioactive waste that are low-level waste, transuranic waste, and there's different technical and legal definitions for waste. But high-level radioactive waste can, in many cases, give an immediate, cause immediate death or within seconds when exposed. It is indisputably some of the hottest, most dangerous radioactive, dangerous material on the planet.
So
the irradiated, yeah.
I just want to go over that again. So, I mean, literally, if you've got a barrel with this stuff in it, and you like walk up to that barrel, you could die before you get to the barrel.
Yeah, except it's usually not in barrel because the high-level waste, it has a definition that, well, okay, so high-level waste comes from, the way it's currently defined in the United States and internationally as well, high-level waste is the irradiated fuel that comes out of the core of nuclear reactors. Nuclear reactors are mostly from nuclear power and nuclear weapons. They take uranium from the ground. It's not that concentrated. They do a lot of processing and concentrate the uranium-235 to make pellets. They stack the pellets in rods. They put the rods into assemblies, and they put those in the core of a reactor, and then neutrons bang into those uraniums. This is at the atomic level, so you can't see it, but that's what's going on in a nuclear power and nuclear weapons reactor core, is you've got uranium atoms, U-235s, that are being hit by neutrons, and then in the weapons reactor, they leave it in until the most plutonium is formed. The uranium atom is big and heavy, but when neutrons bang into it, they glom in and form heavier elements like plutonium. And all those ones that you were mentioning, some of those are plutonium, americium elements that are heavier than uranium. Plutonium is really one of the most deadly elements that exists on the planet, and it's not naturally occurring. So anyway, the plutonium forms, the uraniums are in there, and then also what happens is that the uranium-235 atoms, they split and they form a lot of the other elements, like strontium, which goes to bones and causes bone cancer and leukemia, cesium that goes to muscle,
right,
and the heart, the muscle. So
okay,
anyway,
so let's
bad stuff. It's highly concentrated, and so if it's irradiated fuel, and then they used to reprocess that, where they chop it up and they dissolve it in chemicals and extract the uranium and plutonium out of it, and then liquid and sludge is left. That liquid and sludge has all the strontium and cesium and iodines and bad radioactive elements. That is high-level waste, and the current law requires that it be that it go to a permanent deep geologic repository. We can fight back and forth whether that's a good thing, but that's what's currently required under law, is to centralize it in a place that for permanent attempted disposal and isolation. What the Department of Energy wants to do now, and this is the threat, and we have till the 9th of this week to tell the DOE not to pretend that high-level waste is not high-level waste.
Oh.
So the Department of Energy wanted to, and they've done this, they tried to do it before and they've been sued. They've gone to Congress and tried to get Congress to say that some of the high-level waste, which is around at DOE, Department of Energy weapons sites, or at, high-level waste, which comes from nuclear power and weapons, they want to pretend that some of it is not high-level waste and therefore can be treated as low-level waste, which, by law, can go into unlined soil trenches and much less integrity disposal. So the goal here, the thing I don't know whether you've got folks in your listening audience that are up for emailing the Department of Energy to tell them, do not deregulate nuclear waste, do not reinterpret it as not high level. But I have an email address and I have our website, a link that people can go to and get more information on this.
Okay, well, give the website, and then I'll put the email address on our Facebook page and our website. Is it a long email?
I did a tiny URL. Where did I just write it?
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to recap, that's this Wednesday, right? The 9th, I think.
The 9th is the deadline.
Yeah. So right now the government wants to just magically say this high-level radioactive waste, which can kill you, and which, if it gets out into the environment, can kill anything it gets absorbed by, any plant or animal. Just magically say, oh, it's no longer high level. Just redefining it, not changing it in any way, not treating it in any way, just trying to get out of protecting the environment by just saying, oh, that's no longer dangerous. And so we have to tell them, you're crazy. Don't do that. And so we have till this Wednesday. Okay, so go ahead and give the tiny URL and give your website.
Okay, so it's https previewtinyurl.com. It's Don't Abandon Nuke Waste. Don't Abandon Nuke Waste.
Okay, and so http://tinyurl.com, and then is there a slash?
I can also send it to you if you're going to put it on the website, but it looks like it is https://previewtinyurl.com/don't abandon nuke waste.
Don't abandon nuke waste. All right, and
the word about it is on our website, which is www.nirs.org. It's the initials for Nuclear Information and Resource Service, nirs.org. And on that, you have to click on actions and alerts, and it's the most recent alert that is don't abandon nuclear waste.
All right.
So,
well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and I was going to give the email to, I don't know if you want to hear that. It's if you want to email directly to DOE and just Department of Energy and say, don't abandon high-level nuclear waste, it's hlwnotice@em.doe.gov.
HLWnotice at
DOE.gov.
All right.
It's the Department of Energy. Thank you so much for telling folks about it, Joe.
Well, thank you, Diane, for coming on and giving us this warning, because with a lot of the things that the government does, a lot of the bad things that most people would disagree with, most people don't even know this is happening. So I'm happy to be able to spread the word. All right. Well,
we're hoping that people letting the Department of Energy know that they care about it, even if you don't want to get into all the details. But at the link I gave you at nirs.org, there's a letter that you can click on. You can customize it or just send it in as is. And I think just getting notice into the Department of Energy that you're watching will be very helpful.
All right. Well, thanks, Diane. I wish we could spend the whole hour on this, but unfortunately we've got to move on. So thanks so much for your call.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye.
Bye. All right. Well, that was Diane DeRigo from NIRS, NIRS. All right. So now, because this is commercial radio, we have to do a couple commercials. And I'm actually quite happy to be able to do these commercials because I know and really like the organizations that I'm going to be advertising here. The first one is the coffee house Grounds for Thought. Grounds for Thought is located at 174 South Main Street in Bowling Green, Ohio. They're open every day from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. They sell used books, comics, records. They have fantastic coffee, which you can order online, actually. They sell pastries, Italian ices, all kinds of wonderful, sweet things that you probably shouldn't eat, but are really great when you do eat them. Their used book section is huge. They've got all kinds of bookshelves and for all kinds of books, every sort of thing you can imagine. And they also have a little local author section where people who locally have written and published their books are for sale there, both new and used. Grounds for Thought is really kind of an institution in Bowling Green. They've been around since the late 80s, and they do all sorts of things to help the community, such as sponsor events, and they have meeting rooms that you can use there for free. Their website is www.groundsforthought.com, and Kelly Wicks is the proprietor, Kelly and Laura Wicks, and they've done a fantastic job. It's kind of, to me, the epitome of that small, local, community-minded business that really sustains the economy. These big businesses that stick in franchises and suck money out of communities, this is exactly the opposite of that. They are integrated into the community, and they help the community in many ways. And so I'd urge you, if you're in Bowling Green, take a stroll down Main Street and stop in at Grounds for Thought. You won't be sorry. Our next sponsor we also want to mention is DeMare Consulting, LLC. This was started by someone who's closely related to me, so there's no question there, but it's a computer consulting business, and the difference with DeMare Consulting is that they will actually come out to your home and help you use your home computer right there, and so you don't have to take anything apart. You don't have to drive anything into a store. DeMare Computer Consulting operates in Bowling Green, Toledo, Maumee, Perrysburg, anywhere, and they'll do diagnostics, they'll do system restores, they'll do system repairs, they'll transfer data. So perhaps you got a new laptop for Christmas, lucky you, but it's sitting there unused because everything is on your old laptop. Well, DeMare Computing Consulting will come out and help you transfer all that stuff to the new laptop so you can take advantage of all that extra memory and all that new speed there. So they'll set up new systems for you. DeMare Computer Consulting will also give you one-on-one training, like if you don't know how to use a new kind of software you've got. It's, as I said, was started by a graduate of BGU's computer science department, so they know what they're doing at DeMare Computer Consulting. So the way is to reach them, and you get a 10% discount if you mention that you heard about this on For a Green Future. The phone number is 419-973-3000. That's 419-973-3000. And the website is DeMareConsulting.com. That DeMare is spelled D-E-M-A-R-E, consulting.com. So please give them a call, and if you have any kind of computer needs, something's sitting there that you've been meaning to take care of, give them a call and take care of it. All right, so we have been zipping right along. We have covered a huge amount. It's already almost time to go, and so we just have time to read you the letter from the future. It's a letter from a green future. As I said, it mysteriously appeared on my bedstand just this morning as I was getting ready to come do the show. All right, and on the top it says, to be read January 6th, 2019. So that's today, so it's a good time to read this. Dear Great-Great-Grandpa, my name is Marie I, and I'm writing to you from the year 2299. I'm on a train headed for the Kola Peninsula. I'm part of a team that's going to oversee the injection of radioactive nuclear wastes deep into the Earth's mantle. It's going to be tricky. If we pump the waste in too fast, we can create a new plume in the mantle. That could create new volcanoes or fault lines. My job is to monitor the biota around the borehole and make sure we're not upsetting the deep ecology. Oh, that's right. At your time, most people don't even know that there's a whole ecosystem of bacteria, viruses, and other organisms in the mantle, and that life on the surface of the Earth is completely dependent on the health of these deep ecosystems. If I remember my history right, you had corporations back then that had scientists who knew this, but they didn't tell anybody because it might have stopped them from drilling for oil and gas. Oh, I want you to know you don't have to worry about these letters from the future creating paradoxes or upsetting the timeline or any of those Doctor Who kind of things. Yes, we still have Doctor Who in the future. All these letters are already part of the historical record. So the fact that you got them and read them on the radio is already part of my history. You might also be wondering how I sent these letters back to you. Well, that's going to have to stay secret for a while. If the people of your time had this technology, they might actually have succeeded in wiping out the human race. That's something I really wanted to ask you. At your time, you came so close to actually collapsing the global ecosystems and making the Earth uninhabitable. Did you know what you were doing? You probably drove a car to the radio station, didn't you? What was it like to be put in a box of metal and plastic and glass and drive over huge, flat areas of asphalt that were completely dead and sterile just so you could get from one place to another? You can answer me. Actually, you already have. My father gave me a big box of letters from you addressed to me. Each letter has a date on it, and I'll open each one in turn. Tell your listeners that they can ask me any questions they want this way also. Okay, well, our train is getting near the borehole train stop. As I look out my window, I can see the little biodegradable robots that keep the train tracks clear, waiting alongside the tracks for the train to pass. Beyond them, I can see fields with moose and occasionally a bear, and beyond the fields, I see forest. Some of the trees I'm seeing were probably alive when you were alive. I wonder if they thought we would ever make it to the green future. Don't worry, we will. Love, Marie I. Well, isn't that nice? It's always nice to get a letter from the grandkids, and especially the great-great-grandkids. All right, so we have done a lot. We've covered a ton of ground. We heard from Diane DeRigo at Nuclear Information Resource Institute about the plan to simply redefine deadly high-level radioactive waste as non-high level. Just change the definition, then you don't have to worry about it. And please do call into the Department of Energy or go to the NEAR's website and see how you can tell the Department of Energy not to do this terrible thing. We heard from Marky Miller, who talked about the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, which a lot of people have put a lot of energy into getting on the ballot for the city of Toledo. And the vote's coming up in February. And we're going to talk more about that in the future. We also got a very nice call about solar energy and wind power. And we were able to talk about how those are actually the most economical forms of energy. Oh, and one thing I do want to mention about that, people might wonder why we don't have tons of wind turbines. If it's so economical, why aren't there more of them? Well, the wonderful Republican-controlled legislature in the state of Ohio passed this law. It's called the setback law. And it says that you have to have 1/4 of a mile from the edge of your property line to a wind turbine. And so what that means is you have to own at least a 1/2 mile square piece of property. And then if you have that much, you can only put in one turbine right in the middle. And so what that did is it essentially outlawed utility scale wind power in the state of Ohio. So the only reason we don't have a ton more wind turbines is that the state of Ohio outlawed them, literally made them illegal, kind of the way they made the Green Party illegal. They just decided to pass a law because they don't like wind power. They want fracking. They want oil. They want to stick with the technologies, the energy sources that are literally killing us because they make money. Frankly, that's how they do it. So we have to beat them. We have to get them out of office so they can stop making these bad decisions. And we will. don't worry. If we keep at it, we stay the course. We don't get discouraged, and above all, if we don't give up, we will get them out of power, because they're just so wrong. I mean, and it's so blatant. The rest of the world is leaving the United States in the dust. Wind power and solar power, and the rest of the world is bursting. It's just going gangbusters. In fact, Germany just last year, 2018, wind and solar and hydro passed coal in terms of the amount of power they produce for that country. And so now wind, solar, and hydro are the main power sources in the state of Germany. And coal is now a minor source. And so you can both eliminate coal and eliminate nukes, because Germany is eliminating nuclear power at the same time, and have a perfectly stable economy and a perfectly healthy economy. I mentioned Venus, the planet Venus, and how, the more global warming we have, the closer our planet comes to the planet Venus. Well, I actually wrote a novella on this topic, and it's available on my website. My website is Joe DeMare foragreenfuture.org. That's JOEDEMAREFOR, greenfuture.org. And you can go today and order a copy. This is a novella. It's part of a collection of short stories and novellas called Venusification, and it's available on my website. You can just go and order through PayPal, and I hope you do. These are not just environmental stories. These are all kinds of stories: historical fiction, science fiction, and I'm pretty proud of it. And I think you won't regret buying it. Please do go to my website and order a copy today. You can also find on my website a whole lot of other things. I've got it divided into 3 sections: writing, politics, and media. And right now you're experiencing the media part of For a Green Future. So, and I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you very much for sticking with me for this hour. Thank you for listening. Thank you for helping to spread the word that a green future is possible. And I've done this before. I had a similar show in the Buffalo market. It was called Green Radio, and it became very popular. I had to leave it for personal reasons. I ended up switching careers and moving, but I love it. I love being able to talk to you. I love being in front of the microphone. I love being able to answer questions like the one Lance gave me about wind and solar power, because there's tons and tons of disinformation out there. There's a lot of people who literally are being paid salaries and who earn their livings spreading false information about wind and solar and ecology and what we can and can't do. And I'm here to tell you that not only is a green future possible, but a green future will happen, because it's like wind and solar. It's less expensive, it's healthier, it's better in every way. And I know being better is no guarantee, but it will happen because we will demand it. I mean, people are already putting solar panels on their own houses. The government is failing utterly. The government wants to take us backwards. And there's a president in office who wants to deny reality. And the problem with that is that reality stays whether you deny it or not. And so I'm really, really grateful that you listened in. Got less than a minute left. Don't forget to listen again next week, next Sunday at 8 a.m. And I'm going to rebroadcast this on video on YouTube and Facebook. And it's been wonderful. Thank you.